This video contains information and advice on one aspect of writing in an academic style. It focuses on expressing your own voice in appropriate ways in your writing. That is, whether your language should be personal or impersonal. The presentation includes some short texts. To read them, just pause the video. You'll often hear that academic writing should be impersonal and that you shouldn't use pronouns such as I, me, or we in written assignments. At the same time, you may be told to develop an argument or give your opinion on some topic or to critique the work of others. We'll call this expressing your own voice. So, how can you express your own voice when doing these things and still remain impersonal? And do you always have to remain impersonal? Well, on many occasions you don't. And even if you do, there are still several ways of expressing your own voice and allowing your own opinions to come through. First, we need to distinguish between different types of voice. Sometimes the voice in academic writing is that of an external source, usually an expert. In this case, you can quote the source directly, so the words aren't your own, and your input is restricted to choosing the appropriate quotation. Alternatively, and this is the commonest method, you can paraphrase the source. Here, the words are yours based on the ideas of the original source and expressed impersonally. When you want to comment on the information from the original source or provide information from your own experience, you can do this in two ways. Firstly, by presenting your comment but keeping the language impersonal and not mentioning yourself. In other words, simply making an assertion or stating some facts. Secondly, you can present your ideas using personal language which openly refers to yourself. The first three approaches are considered to be impersonal. An impersonal approach is the one most commonly used. In science-based disciplines, a personal approach is often not acceptable. For example, you typically have to write impersonally in the methods section of a report, even though it's describing actions you yourself carried out. So rather than say, we inoculated the samples in nutrient broth, you'd put the focus on the samples and change the form of the verb, and write, the samples were inoculated in nutrient broth. The same goes for many humanities disciplines. An impersonal approach is generally expected. In this example, instead of using personal language with the possessive form my, the writer uses an impersonal it construction. However, there are several exceptions to the general practice of remaining impersonal. The exceptions may have to do with the conventions of your discipline, the writing task you're engaged in, or the stage of your writing. We'll consider these in turn. Different disciplines often have quite different expectations about how personal your writing can be, and the conventions of your discipline may allow you to take a more personal approach. Personal interpretations may well be necessary, for example, when you're discussing a performance you yourself were involved in, or in giving your reaction to an artwork. The students in several disciplines are sometimes asked to write reflective assignments, in which they are to think about certain experiences they've had, perhaps while doing some kind of fieldwork or practice, and to describe how these experiences have affected them personally or how they have helped them in their understanding of the discipline. Here, you can't avoid a personal approach. Finally, the stage of your writing may be a factor in deciding your approach. There may be places in a piece of academic writing where it's more acceptable to use personal language. These may be, for example, in the introduction, where you're stating the purpose of your assignment, or in the conclusion, where you're summing up the major issues which you have discussed. In addition to these common exceptions, it's possible to find a personal approach where an impersonal one would normally be expected. For example, a quick search of the literature will reveal a number of scientific reports which contain expressions like, we found that, rather than, it was found that. Sometimes both approaches can be found in the same text. Shifting between one style and the other in the same text is quite common in disciplines involving fieldwork or placement. Here, the student may make personal observations and then relate their own experience to theory. Here, the theoretical support for the writer's view is expressed in impersonal language. Be aware that opinions differ on the type of language which should be used. These are some of the steps you should take to ensure you make the right decisions.